The kind act Marcus Turner had never been the type of man who sought out attention or praise, and that was exactly why so many people in the small town of Brooksville respected him. At 35, Marcus had built a life that was humble and grounded, a life stitched together with small acts of kindness, quiet responsibilities, and a deep sense of duty to his community. He worked as a maintenance technician at the community center, a role that required him to fix broken doors, replace light bulbs, unclog sinks, and do the kinds of tasks that others often overlooked. Yet his coworkers and the townsfolk saw him as far more than just the man with a toolbox. To them, he was a steady presence, a person who could be relied upon to show up when things went wrong. Not because he was paid to, but because he genuinely cared. His warm smile, his calm voice, and his easygoing manner made people feel safe around him. Brooksville was the sort of place where people waved to each other as they drove by on the single stretch of Main Street. It was where Mrs. Jenkins at the diner knew everyone's breakfast order before they even sat down, and where the children played in the same park their parents once had. It was the kind of place where the rhythms of life were simple, and though not everyone lived without worry, people took comfort in knowing they were part of something small but solid. Marcus fit into this rhythm effortlessly. Every morning he rose before dawn, poured himself a cup of coffee, and stepped onto the wooden porch of his modest single-story home. The house, inherited from his parents, had peeling paint and creaky floors, but to Marcus it carried a warmth no luxury mansion could rival. He would sip his coffee slowly, letting the quiet of dawn wrap around him while the rising sun painted the sky in hues of gold and orange. That stillness gave him strength for the day ahead. It was during one of these ordinary days, after finishing his shift at the community center, that Marcus found himself driving along the back roads that wound lazily around Brooksville. The air was warm, tinged with the scent of pine, and the road stretched out before him in long, winding curves. He enjoyed these drives, the silence inside his old but sturdy pickup truck, the way the landscape seemed to roll like an endless quilt of green fields and scattered farmhouses. He was not in a hurry, never was. His philosophy in life was simple: slow down, take in what you can, and lend a hand where needed. As he rounded a bend that evening, the soft glow of the sunset lighting the horizon, he noticed a car pulled to the side of the road. Its hazard lights blinked like tired eyes in the dimming light, and beside it stood a woman whose body language told a story of both frustration and distress. She was pacing slightly, phone in hand, looking at it and then glancing nervously up and down the road as if hoping someone would come along. Marcus slowed down instinctively, his sense of responsibility nudging him like a whisper. As his truck rolled to a stop behind her vehicle, she turned to him, relief washing over her face in an almost visible wave. Marcus stepped out of his truck, his boots crunching against the gravel. He offered a reassuring smile, lifting a hand in greeting. "Evening, ma'am. Trouble with the car?" The woman nodded quickly, brushing a loose strand of blonde hair from her face. She looked to be in her late 20s, dressed in a pencil skirt and blouse that now looked rumpled from her ordeal. "Yes, thank goodness you stopped. I've got a flat tire and I have no idea how to change it. I've been trying to figure it out, but it's hopeless." Her voice carried equal parts embarrassment and desperation, as though admitting helplessness pained her. Marcus's smile deepened, warm and easy. "Don't worry about it. I've changed more tires than I can count. I'll have you back on the road before you know it." He walked toward her car, a sleek silver sedan that looked out of place on the rougher back roads of Brooksville. The tools lay scattered on the ground near the trunk, evidence of her attempt to manage the situation on her own. She let out a sigh of relief. "Thank you so much. I was starting to panic. My name's Sarah, by the way. Sarah Collins." "Nice to meet you, Sarah. I'm Marcus," he replied, already kneeling down to set the jack in place. His movements were practiced, confident. He had grown up around cars and machinery, taught by his father to handle tools before he was even tall enough to reach the workbench. Sarah hovered near him, her nervous energy filling the air. She kept glancing at the road as though expecting someone or something to appear. Marcus noticed but didn't comment. People reacted differently to being stranded. Some got angry, others anxious. He chalked it up to her being shaken. "You're new around here, aren't you?" Marcus asked as he loosened the lug nuts with steady hands. "I don't think I've seen you in town before." Sarah hesitated for half a second before nodding. "Yeah, I just moved here a few months ago. Still trying to get used to the area." She forced a small laugh. Guess I wasn't prepared for flat tires on back roads. Marcus chuckled softly. It happens. Roads out here aren't always kind to city cars. He lifted the deflated tire off and rolled it to the side, then pulled the spare from her trunk. The entire process was second nature to him, yet he worked carefully, making sure everything was secure. He never liked to rush a job, no matter how small. As he tightened the spare into place, Sarah spoke again, her voice softer. You didn't have to stop, you know. Most people would have just driven by. Marcus glanced up, his expression thoughtful. Maybe, but I couldn't do that. If someone's in need, I believe you help them. That's how my folks raised me. Her eyes flickered with something. Gratitude, maybe, but also something deeper, harder to place. She looked away quickly, nodding. That's rare these days. When he finished, Marcus lowered the car back onto the ground and wiped his hands on an old rag he kept in the truck. There you go. Good as new. Well, at least good enough to get you home or to a shop. Sarah's shoulders seemed to sag with relief. I don't even know how to thank you. You have no idea what this means. Marcus gave a small shrug. You don't need to thank me. Just drive safe. But Sarah shook her head firmly as though unsettled by his humility. No, really. This isn't just about the tire. I was in a really bad spot tonight, and you showing up, it felt like more than coincidence. Marcus raised an eyebrow but kept his tone light. Sometimes life works out like that. He offered a reassuring smile. You'll be all right. She looked at him for a long moment, her lips parting as though she wanted to say more, but then she seemed to think better of it. Instead, she nodded and slipped into her car. Thank you, Marcus, truly, I won't forget this. Marcus watched her taillights fade into the distance, a quiet unease settling over him, though he couldn't explain why. He shook it off and climbed back into his truck, reminding himself it was just another evening, just another good deed. Yet as he drove home under the canopy of stars beginning to dot the sky, he couldn't ignore the nagging feeling that this simple act of kindness was only the beginning of something much larger. That night, Marcus followed his usual routine. He ate a simple dinner, read a few pages of a well-worn book, and then settled into bed. His sleep, however, was restless. Images of Sarah's nervous glances replayed in his mind, her voice lingering when she said she wouldn't forget what he had done. He didn't know why it unsettled him, but it did. The next morning, Marcus rose before dawn as always, stepped onto his porch with his steaming mug of coffee, and let the quiet morning air settle around him. But instead of peace, he felt a tension buzzing just beneath the surface. The air seemed charged, expectant, as though the world was holding its breath. And then, just as the sun began to rise, the sound of an engine reached his ears. Down the road, a black SUV appeared, its sleek frame moving steadily toward his house. It slowed, then stopped right in front of his driveway. The engine idled, low and steady, while Marcus stood frozen on his porch, coffee cooling in his hand. The door to the SUV opened, but whoever was inside didn't step out immediately. Instead, Marcus could see only the faint outline of a figure in the driver's seat. Waiting, watching, and in that moment, Marcus knew with a strange, bone-deep certainty that his life was about to change forever. The black SUV lingered at the edge of Marcus's driveway like a shadow made solid, its presence quiet, but impossible to ignore. The morning light spilled across its polished surface, making it look more out of place than ever against the backdrop of Brooksville's simple homes and unpaved roads. Marcus stood on his porch, coffee mug still in hand, but his gaze locked on the vehicle. His instincts told him that something about this moment was pivotal, that his ordinary life was already slipping toward the extraordinary without his consent. The driver's door finally opened, and a man stepped out. He was tall, dressed in a dark suit that contrasted sharply with the casual small-town atmosphere. Everything about him screamed control, his steady movements, his sharp eyes hidden behind tinted sunglasses, and the way he seemed to scan the surroundings as though calculating risks. Marcus didn't move. He simply watched as the man closed the door and slowly approached, his polished shoes crunching on the gravel of the driveway. "Mr. Turner?" the man asked, his voice even, measured. Marcus set his mug on the porch railing before answering. "That's me. Can I help you?" His tone was polite but guarded. The stranger removed his sunglasses, revealing sharp gray eyes that carried the weight of someone who had seen far too much. "Name's Donovan. I'm with, let's just say, a division that doesn't put its name on the door." I need to ask you a few questions about last night. Marcus blinked, puzzled. Last night? Donovan's gaze narrowed slightly. A woman, blonde, late 20s. Car trouble on the roadside. Ring any bells? Marcus's chest tightened. Yeah, I stopped to help her change a flat. That's all it was. Why? Donovan studied him for a long moment as though measuring the honesty of his words. Then he nodded once. Her name is Sarah Collins. What you may not realize is that by stopping to help her, you've stepped into something larger than yourself. We need to know exactly what was said, what you saw, and whether she mentioned anything unusual. Marcus frowned, a mix of confusion and irritation stirring inside him. I don't know what you're talking about. She was stranded, I helped, she thanked me, and then she drove off. That's the whole story. Donovan's lips pressed into a thin line. He didn't argue, but his silence felt heavier than words. Finally, he spoke. Sometimes the simplest moments carry the greatest weight. Whether you believe it or not, last night changed more than just her evening, it changed yours too. And you'd be wise to keep your eyes open. Marcus folded his arms, standing tall on the porch. He wasn't one to be easily intimidated, but there was something unsettling about Donovan's calm certainty. What exactly are you saying? That I'm in danger? That she's in danger? Donovan slipped his sunglasses back on, his expression unreadable once more. Let's just say Sarah is connected to people who don't like unfinished business. And you, Mr. Turner, are now part of that unfinished business. He turned and began walking back toward the SUV. Wait, Marcus called out, his voice carrying a note of defiance. If she's in trouble, maybe she needs help. I don't walk away from people who need help. Donovan paused, hand resting on the SUV door handle. He turned his head slightly, his words low but clear. Sometimes helping can cost you more than you're willing to pay. With that, he slipped back into the vehicle. The SUV's engine roared softly, and within moments it was gone, leaving behind only a faint trail of dust and a silence that seemed far too loud. Marcus stood frozen for several minutes, the weight of the encounter pressing on him. His life had always been grounded in simplicity, rooted in the small acts of service he offered to others. Yet now, without warning, he was caught in something that felt like the opening act of a story he hadn't agreed to join. Later that day, as Marcus went about his usual tasks at the community center, his mind kept drifting back to Sarah. The memory of her nervous glances, her insistence that his help meant more than just fixing a tire, and now Donovan's ominous words. They wove together into a pattern that demanded his attention. He couldn't shake the sense that she hadn't told him the whole truth. That evening, he drove to the diner for his usual meal. Mrs. Jenkins greeted him warmly, setting down his plate of scrambled eggs, toast, and bacon as always. But she quickly noticed the distraction in his eyes. You're a million miles away tonight. Marcus, she said, tilting her head as she wiped the counter. Just a lot on my mind, he replied quietly, stirring his coffee absent-mindedly. Well, don't let it eat you up. Folks around here count on you. Whatever it is, you'll figure it out. Marcus managed a small smile, appreciating her faith in him. But deep down, he knew this was different. This wasn't the kind of problem a wrench or hammer could fix. As he left the diner and stepped into the cool night air, Marcus noticed something unusual. A figure stood across the street, half hidden in the shadows between two buildings. For a moment he thought it was just another passerby, but then the figure shifted, and he caught the glint of eyes trained on him. Marcus's chest tightened. He turned and began walking toward his truck, his steps steady, refusing to show fear. When he glanced back once more, the figure was gone, swallowed by the darkness. Back home, Marcus locked his doors for the first time in years. He sat at his kitchen table, the silence of the house pressing down on him. His mind raced with questions he couldn't answer. Who was Sarah, really? What had she been running from? And why did helping her make him a target of interest to people who drove black SUVs and spoke in warnings? As he sat there, staring at the fading light through his window, he realized something that sent a chill through him. He had always believed in kindness and helping others without expecting anything in return. But now he was learning a truth he had never considered, that sometimes the price of kindness wasn't gratitude but danger. Still, Marcus knew himself too well to retreat. If Sarah was in trouble, if she was connected to something dark, he couldn't simply pretend he hadn't crossed her path. She had looked at him that night with eyes that carried fear, yes, but also hope, and if fate had chosen him to be the one to stand by her, then he would not turn away. That night, as Marcus drifted into uneasy sleep, his resolve hardened. He didn't know what was coming, but he knew this much. Whatever storm had entered his life, he would face it the same way he faced everything else, by standing tall, by doing what was right, and by never abandoning someone who needed him. And somewhere, in the quiet darkness beyond Brooksville, a different pair of eyes watched his house carefully, waiting for the moment when Marcus's choice would bring him deeper into a story that had only just begun. The truth, revealed, Marcus woke the next morning with the heavy memory of the black SUV and Donovan's warning still clinging to him like a shadow that refused to leave. He sat on his porch with his usual cup of coffee, but the peaceful dawn no longer felt the same. The air was cool, the sun rising steady, but he could not shake the sense that unseen eyes were watching him. In Brooksville, life had always been predictable. People kept to their routines, the town carried a steady heartbeat, and everyone knew everyone else's name. Yet now Marcus's life carried an undertone of unease, as though he were walking on ground that could shift beneath him at any moment. The first few hours of his morning passed as usual. He fixed a leaking faucet at the community center, helped Mrs. Dean carry groceries into her home, and patched a loose step on the back porch of the building. Yet everywhere he went, Marcus found himself scanning corners, watching the roads, listening for engines that lingered too long. He was not a man prone to paranoia, but the stranger's warning had unsettled him deeply. And more than that, Sarah's nervous face kept replaying in his mind, her insistence that his help had meant more than he realized. That afternoon, as Marcus was finishing his shift, he heard someone call his name.
He turned and saw Sarah standing near the community center's entrance.
She looked different from the night before, her hair loose around her shoulders, her clothes casual, but her eyes carried the same unease. Marcus felt his stomach tighten. "Sarah?" he said, wiping his hands on a rag as he approached. "What are you doing here?" She glanced around nervously as though afraid of being seen. "I needed to find you." "Can we talk?" "Somewhere private." Marcus studied her carefully. The warning from Donovan echoed in his head, but so did his own conviction that people in need should never be ignored. He nodded slowly. "All right. Follow me." He led her to the small maintenance shed behind the center, a place where he kept tools and supplies, but also a spot that offered privacy. Once inside, Sarah paced for a moment before finally speaking. "Marcus, I owe you the truth. You probably think I was just some woman stranded on the side of the road, but it's not that simple. The truth is, I wasn't just scared of being stuck out there. I was scared of being found." Marcus's brow furrowed. "Found by who?" She hesitated, wringing her hands. "By people who want something from me. People who don't care who gets hurt in the process. You helping me last night, it wasn't just kindness. It put you in their line of sight. And now you're in danger because of me." Marcus absorbed her words in silence, his steady gaze fixed on her. Finally he asked, "Why don't you start from the beginning? Tell me what you're caught up in." Sarah shook her head quickly. "Donovan. He's not with them. He's with the people trying to stop them. But the fact that he came to you means they've already connected you to me. That's why I was so nervous when you helped me. I wasn't just afraid of being stranded. I was afraid they'd catch up to me before I could get away." Marcus leaned back against the workbench, folding his arms as he processed what she had said. He had grown up in a world where honesty and kindness were the guiding principles, where life's challenges were tangible, broken pipes, cracked windows, roofs that leaked. But now he was staring at something invisible, something far more dangerous than anything he had fixed before. "Sarah," he said at last, his voice steady. "Why come here? Why find me?" Her eyes softened, and for the first time he saw a flicker of genuine trust beneath her fear. "Because you didn't have to help me, but you did. And I believe you're the kind of person who won't turn away now. I don't have anyone else to trust." Marcus held her gaze, the weight of her words settling over him. He didn't ask for this. He didn't want it. But he also knew himself well enough to recognize the truth. Walking away was not an option. "All right," he said firmly. "If you're in trouble, we'll figure this out. You're not alone." Relief washed over Sarah's face, but it was quickly shadowed by anxiety. "You don't understand what you're saying yes to. They'll come after anyone who stands with me. They don't play fair." Marcus gave a small, steady smile. "I've never been afraid of standing up for what's right, and I'm not about to start now." For a brief moment, silence hung between them. the kind of silence that signaled the start of something larger than both of them. Sarah nodded slowly, her eyes brimming with gratitude. That night, Marcus returned home more aware than ever of how much his life had changed in just 2 days. His modest house, once a safe haven of routine, now felt like a fortress under threat. He locked his doors again, checked the windows, and kept the porch light on long after midnight. Yet even as fear gnawed at the edges of his mind, another emotion grew stronger: resolve. The following day, as Marcus drove through town, he noticed a black sedan parked near the edge of Main Street. It wasn't the SUV from before, but the way it lingered, the way its driver pretended to read a newspaper while occasionally glancing up, it sent a clear message. He was being watched. That evening, Sarah returned. She carried a small backpack, her shoulders tense but her eyes determined. "I can't keep running forever," she said quietly. "If I keep moving, they'll always be one step behind. Maybe with your help, I can finally stop hiding." Marcus opened the door wider, gesturing her inside. "Then we stop hiding," he replied simply. It was then that Marcus realized something profound. He had always believed that kindness was about small things: fixing a leaky faucet, carrying groceries, helping someone stranded on the road. But now he understood that kindness could also mean courage. It could mean standing in the path of danger for the sake of someone else. And as much as fear lingered in the corners of his heart, he knew one thing with certainty: he would not let Sarah face this alone. Outside, unseen by them both, the black sedan's engine started. Headlights cut through the night as it rolled slowly down the road, a silent reminder that the story Marcus had been pulled into was only just beginning, and that every decision he made from here on would ripple far beyond the quiet boundaries of Brooksville. Consequences. The following days moved with a tension that Marcus had never known before. Brooksville, once a town of quiet routines and familiar rhythms, now felt like a stage where unseen players lurked just beyond the curtain. The black sedan still appeared at odd hours, parked just far enough away to avoid suspicion from anyone else, yet always close enough for Marcus to notice. It never stayed long, just enough to remind him that he and Sarah were being watched. Inside his modest home, Marcus tried to maintain the normalcy that gave him strength. He still rose before dawn, brewed his coffee, and sat on the porch to watch the sunrise. But now his eyes constantly drifted to the road, searching for shapes in the distance. Sarah had taken to staying inside, keeping her backpack close, her nervous glances betraying her fear even when she tried to hide it. Despite the weight of it all, Marcus found that his resolve was only growing stronger. The world had drawn him into something larger than himself, but he refused to let fear dictate his choices. On the third night after Sarah's confession, Marcus heard the sound of tires crunching against gravel outside. He rose from his chair, heart tightening, and moved quietly to the window. A different vehicle had arrived this time, not the black sedan, but the same black SUV from before. The headlights cut through the darkness, then faded as the engine shut off. A heavy silence followed before the sound of a car door opening broke it. Marcus opened his front door before the knock could come. Donovan stood there again, dressed in the same sharp suit, his expression as controlled as ever. "You've been busy," Donovan said quietly, his gray eyes flicking past Marcus toward the faint light inside the house. "Mind if we talk?" Marcus hesitated only a moment before stepping aside. "Come in." Sarah stood from the couch as Donovan entered, her face pale. "You again," she said, her voice tight with distrust. Donovan regarded her calmly. "Yes, me again. And I think you know why. The longer you stay here, the more danger you bring to this man in this town." Sarah's eyes filled with emotion. "Do you think I don't know that? Do you think I wanted him dragged into this? I never asked for his help." Marcus cut her off gently. "Yes, you did, Sarah, maybe not with words, but you did. And I don't regret it." Donovan's gaze returned to Marcus. "Your loyalty is admirable, Mr. Turner, but understand this. These people don't forgive and they don't forget. Sarah has information they want buried, and they will stop at nothing to get it back. Harboring her means you're standing in their way, and trust me, they'll make you pay for it." Marcus folded his arms, his stance solid. "Then let them come. I'm not letting her fight this alone." For the first time, Donovan's expression shifted almost imperceptibly, as though Marcus's words had struck a chord. He studied Marcus in silence before speaking again. You may not realize it, but that choice says more about you than you know. Most people would have walked away by now. Marcus shrugged slightly. Maybe most people haven't seen what happens when good men do nothing. My parents raised me better than that. Sarah lowered her head, her eyes glistening, but she said nothing. Donovan finally exhaled, a sound that carried both frustration and reluctant respect. Very well. But if you're going to protect her, you need to be prepared for what's coming. They won't play fair and they won't wait long. He reached into his jacket, pulled out a folded slip of paper and placed it on the table. This is a safe location. If things get bad, take her there. People will help you. Marcus nodded slowly. And you? Whose side are you really on? Donovan's eyes hardened. The side that wants to keep the world from falling into the hands of men who see people as data points to exploit. Don't mistake my warnings for threats, Mr. Turner. We're on the same side, even if it doesn't feel like it. With that, he turned and left. The sound of the SUV fading into the night. The house fell into silence again. Sarah sat heavily on the couch, her face pale, her hands gripping the edge of her backpack. Marcus joined her, his presence steady. He's right, Sarah whispered. You shouldn't be in this. They'll come after you just to get to me. I can't let you risk everything. Marcus looked at her, his voice calm but resolute. Sarah, I've spent my life fixing what's broken. Things, places, sometimes even people. I can't walk away from this, not now. If danger's coming, then we'll face it together. But you're not going through this alone anymore. Her eyes met his, shimmering with gratitude and fear all at once. She nodded slowly, her voice breaking. I don't know how to thank you. You don't need to, Marcus said softly. Just stay strong. That's thanks enough. The next few days passed in a haze of unease. Marcus noticed more signs that they were being watched. Strange cars parked on side streets, unfamiliar faces at the diner, the subtle shift of curtains when he walked past certain houses. Brooksville was small enough that any change was noticeable, and Marcus felt those changes pressing in like storm clouds gathering overhead. Then one evening, the storm broke. Marcus had just stepped onto his porch when he heard the unmistakable sound of footsteps approaching quickly from the side of the house. His instincts flared, and before he could react, two men in dark clothing appeared. Their faces were shadowed by caps, their movements sharp and purposeful. One of them lunged, but Marcus, strong from years of physical work, reacted with speed. He dodged to the side, grabbing the man's arm and twisting it until the intruder stumbled. The second man rushed forward, but Marcus swung hard, his fist connecting solidly and sending the man staggering. The struggle was fast, brutal, and unrelenting. These were not men unaccustomed to violence. They moved with practiced precision, and Marcus realized with a grim certainty that they weren't here to scare him. They were here to take Sarah. Inside, Sarah screamed, the sound piercing the night. She clutched her backpack and tried to retreat deeper into the house, but one of the men broke free from Marcus's grip and lunged toward her. Marcus's heart thundered. He surged forward, tackling the intruder with all the force his body could muster. They crashed into the living room, knocking over a table. Marcus fought with a primal intensity he had never known in himself. His fists landed heavy blows, his strength fueled not by training but by sheer determination. In the chaos, the men realized their plan had failed. They had underestimated him. With curses muttered under their breath, they retreated, slipping into the darkness as quickly as they had arrived. Marcus stood panting, sweat dripping down his face, his knuckles raw. Sarah was crouched against the wall, tears streaming down her cheeks, her body trembling. Marcus moved to her, his presence steady even in his exhaustion. They're not taking you, he said firmly, his voice like iron. Not while I'm here. For the first time since this ordeal began, Sarah broke completely. She sobbed into his chest, her hands gripping his shirt as though anchoring herself to him. Marcus held her tightly, his heart pounding not just from the fight but from the realization of what it all meant. The storm had truly arrived and there was no turning back. From that night on, Marcus knew the battle had shifted. No longer was this about helping a stranger change a tire. No longer was it about small acts of kindness. This was about survival. About courage, about refusing to let darkness consume someone who had placed her fragile trust in him. The consequences had arrived, sharp and brutal, but Marcus was ready to face them, because deep inside he knew that kindness wasn't weakness. Kindness was strength, and it was the only weapon he had left to wield against a world that seemed determined to break him. the life-changing ripple. The night after the attack settled heavy over Marcus's home, as though the darkness itself was aware of the violence it had witnessed. Marcus barely slept, his body aching from the fight, his mind refusing to rest. Sarah lay curled up on the couch, her backpack clutched tightly against her chest as though it alone stood between her and the world's dangers. The quiet hum of the refrigerator was the only sound in the house. But Marcus's ears strained as though expecting every creak in the floorboards, every whisper of wind against the walls, to announce another threat. By dawn, he had made his decision. He could not keep Sarah hidden in his modest home forever. Brooksville was a small town and people talked. The men who attacked would return, and next time they would come prepared. Donovan's warning and the slip of paper with the safe location he had left behind now weighed heavily on Marcus's thoughts. He had never been a man to run from trouble, but this wasn't just his battle anymore. It was Sarah's survival, and maybe even something larger than that. Over breakfast, 2 cups of strong coffee and toast neither of them ate, Marcus finally spoke. "Sarah, we can't stay here. They know where to find us. If we stay, they'll keep coming, and next time I might not be enough to stop them. Donovan gave me a place where you'd be safe. I think we need to go." Sarah's face was pale, her eyes rimmed with exhaustion. She held his gaze for a long moment before nodding slowly. "I don't want you to risk more than you already have. But I can't keep running forever either. If I go with you, it's not just about hiding. I want to stop this. I want to finish what I started." Marcus felt a flicker of admiration rise through his fatigue. Sarah was terrified, but beneath her fear lived a core of courage. She wasn't just a victim. She was someone who had chosen to resist even when it cost her everything. "Then we'll finish it," Marcus said firmly. "Together." They left Brooksville that morning. Marcus packed only essentials into his truck: some clothes, food, a first aid kit, and tools. Sarah's backpack never left her hands, its contents carrying the evidence she had stolen. As the truck rolled out of town, Marcus felt a strange ache. He looked back once at the quiet streets, the diner, the community center, the porch where he had watched countless sunrises. Brooksville had always been his world, steady and safe. But now he was leaving that behind, stepping into a storm he could no longer avoid. Hours later, after driving across winding roads and silent highways, they reached the address Donovan had given them. It was an old farmhouse tucked away behind rows of trees, its paint faded but its structure solid. As Marcus pulled up, 2 men appeared from the porch. They weren't dressed like Donovan, no suits, no sharp shoes, but their stance and watchful eyes spoke of training. They approached cautiously until Marcus lowered his window. "I'm Marcus Turner," he said calmly. "Donovan sent us." The men exchanged a glance before one of them nodded. "You're expected." Park the truck around back. Inside, the farmhouse had been transformed into something more than a home. Maps and papers lined the walls. Computers hummed softly, and the air carried the faint scent of coffee and machinery. It was clear this was a safe house, but also a place of planning. Donovan appeared from a side room, his expression unreadable but his eyes sharp as ever. "You made it," Donovan said simply. His gaze flicked to Sarah, who stood close to Marcus. "Good. Now we can finally begin." Sarah's voice trembled, but her resolve was clear. "I brought the files. Everything I copied. They've been chasing me because of this." She set her backpack on the table and unzipped it, pulling out a small hard drive. "It's all here. Proof of what they've been doing." Donovan leaned forward, his hands resting on the table. "Do you realize what you've done, Sarah? This isn't just about one company. This is about exposing a network, a machine built on fear and control. With this, we can bring them down, but they'll fight to keep it buried. And Marcus," his eyes turned to the man standing steady at Sarah's side, "if you choose to stay, you're stepping into a war that won't end easily." Marcus's jaw tightened, his voice calm but resolute. "I've already chosen. If this fight needs doing, then I'll stand with her." Sarah glanced up at him, her eyes shimmering. In that moment, Marcus understood something deeper. She had carried her burden alone for so long that his presence was more than just protection. It was hope. The following days blurred into planning. Donovan's team worked tirelessly, extracting data from the hard drive, cross-checking it with their own intelligence. Marcus stayed close to Sarah, offering her the steady calm she so desperately needed. Yet even here, within the farmhouse walls, danger pressed close. Cars were spotted on distant roads. Drones passed overhead. The enemy was closing in. One night, just as the farmhouse settled into uneasy sleep, the storm came again. This time it was no small team, it was a full assault. Vehicles roared up the driveway, lights cutting through the darkness. Donovan's men rushed into position, weapons drawn, but Marcus felt the old weight in his chest, the same weight that had pressed down on him when he first saw Sarah stranded on the roadside. He wasn't a soldier. He wasn't trained for battles like this. But he knew what was at stake, and he refused to let fear define him. The fight was chaos. Shouts and gunfire split the night. Marcus shielded Sarah, guiding her through the farmhouse's back hallways as Donovan's team pushed back the attackers. The air was thick with smoke, the floor trembling beneath the weight of the assault. Sarah clutched the hard drive tightly, her knuckles white, her breaths ragged. At one point, a man burst through a side door, his eyes cold, his hand reaching for Sarah. Marcus surged forward, tackling him with every ounce of strength he had left. They crashed into a wall, Marcus's fists landing heavy, desperate blows until the intruder stilled. His body ached, his lungs burned, but he refused to stop. He had promised Sarah she would not face this alone, and he meant it. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, silence fell. The attackers retreated, leaving behind broken doors, shattered windows, and the smell of smoke. Donovan's men secured the perimeter, while inside, Sarah collapsed into a chair, tears streaming down her face. Marcus knelt beside her, his hand steady on hers. "It's over," he said softly, though his own body trembled with exhaustion. "You're safe." But Donovan shook his head. "Not over, not yet. But tonight you proved something, Marcus. You're no longer just a man who stopped to change a tire. You're part of this fight now, whether you like it or not." Sarah looked at Marcus then, her tears mixing with a small, trembling smile. "No," she whispered. "He's more than that. He's the reason I'm still standing." Days later, the files Sarah carried were delivered into the right hands. News outlets began to uncover stories of corruption, of hidden surveillance, of power abused. The company that once hunted her now found itself under the unblinking eyes of the world. The storm was not fully over, but the tides had shifted. Marcus and Sarah eventually returned to Brooksville, though life would never be the same. People looked at Marcus differently now, not just as the man who fixed leaky faucets and carried groceries, but as someone who had stood against forces far larger than himself. He never sought recognition, but in quiet conversations at the diner, in the nods of neighbors who had heard whispers of what he had done, he saw the subtle ripple of respect spreading through his community. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in gold, Marcus sat on his porch once more, a cup of coffee in hand. Sarah sat beside him, her shoulders no longer tense, her laughter finally free. The world beyond Brooksville was still full of shadows, but here, in this small corner, light prevailed. Marcus turned his gaze toward the horizon, his heart steady. He had never asked for this journey, never sought to be anything more than a man of simple kindness. Yet in helping a stranger change a tire, he had discovered a truth that would stay with him forever. A single act of kindness can ignite a chain of events that changes not only one life, but countless others. And sometimes, it is in the simplest choices, the choice to stop, to help, to stand by someone, that the greatest strength of all is revealed.